Hi, it's Donovan Delore from Long and Foster again, and today I want to talk to you about agency relationships in the real estate industry. So whenever a realtor interacts and talks with people about real estate, there are several types of agency relationships that can be formed. The two basic relationships that are formed are buyer's agency and seller agency. These two types of agency are pretty self-explanatory. A buyer's agent looks out for the buyer's best interest, while the seller's agent looks out for the seller's best interest. Usually, real estate transactions involve a selling agent and a buyer's agent. These two agents will communicate with each other as the transaction unfolds, and they'll both be working to meet their client's needs. There's also an agency relationship called a dual agency relationship, which is when both parties are represented by the same entity, by the same agent or brokerages. Here in Maryland, dual agency can't happen at the agent level. That means one agent can't represent a buyer and a seller at the same time. But when people refer to dual agency in Maryland, what they're referring to is the brokerage or the company that the agents work for. If there's a buyer's agent and a seller's agent that are working together in a transaction, then dual agency occurs at the broker level, not at the agent level, but at the broker level. So technically the company is working for both sides, but not the individual agents. The reason there's agents for each party in real estate transactions is that so each party can have an agent that will make sure they're getting the most out of the deal. For instance, without a buyer's agent involved, a selling agent could take advantage of a buyer if they were to know things such as the buyer's financial situation. And a buyer may not know all of the options they have if they don't have an agent to explain the process. So even though you're talking with a realtor and you haven't signed any papers, there may be a legal agency relationship already formed. For instance, in the state of Maryland, when you go to an open house, the agent that's holding the open house, even though most of the time they're not the listing agent, they're technically representing the seller. So an agent who's looking out for the buyer's best interest, but they don't have a signed agency agreement, that agent is known as a presumed buyer's agent. Presumed means that there's no express or written agreement between the parties. It's just that the agent assumes that they are going to be looking out for the buyer's best interest and that they're going to be helping the buyer through the transaction as their agent. So presumed buyer agency sometimes may be used in the beginning of a transaction when, say, agent and their clients are just trying to get a feel for each other and to figure out how each other works. But ultimately, in order for you to buy a home, you're going to have some sort of formal, express written agency agreement in order for that agent to write offers for you and for them to help you through the process. Having a formal agency agreement will also allow your agent to best serve you because they'll be able to know that you're dedicated to them and that they won't have to worry about all the time that goes into buying a home if they know that you're going to be dedicated to them and that you're going to be willing to stick with them to the end of the transaction. For a seller to sell a home, they're going to have an express agency agreement written out from the beginning. There's no real presumed seller's agent except for the open house agent I told you about. To sell a home, you have to have an express agency agreement. So in the state of Maryland, there's two forms that we use to declare the agency relationship that's going to be used. These two forms are not the documents that you would use to create an express agreement or a written agreement. These two forms I have are disclosures that will disclose the type of agency created. So if you were to sign one of these forms that said that you were going to be working with an agent and that agent was going to be your buyer's agent, that agent would only be a presumed buyer's agent. They wouldn't be an express buyer's agent because you guys don't have an official signed written agreement for agency. These are just disclosures that will disclose the type of agency that's going to be created. So the first form I have here is the Understanding Your Real Estate Agents Represent form. And this is the form that will outline all the different types of agency. As you can see, they're all listed on the form here. And some of the more complex types of agencies are listed on that form, and you can read the whole thing and find out all the different types of agencies that exist. The second form here I have is the Consent for Dual Agency form. The Consent for Dual Agency form is the form that will have to be signed by the parties if the buyer and the seller have agents that work for the same company. As I said, in Maryland, you can't have a single agent represent the buyer and the seller, so dual agency can occur at the company level. So if there's a transaction that involves a listing agent involves a listing agent and a buyer's agent that work for the same company that are working together, then that's where that consent for dual agency form will have to be signed. So in order for your agent to show you properties that are listed with the company they work for, you'll have to have that consent for dual agency form signed. So it's pretty important, especially if you're working with an agent who works for a pretty big company. So you're going to see these two forms with any real estate agency you visit. Anywhere you go, you're going to see those two forms. And as I said, they don't obligate you to anything. So the last thing I wanted to explain is that the source of compensation for an agent doesn't determine the type of agency relationship. So what I mean by this is that just because you have an agent working for you, say as your buyer's agent, looking out for your best interest, and they facilitate a transaction where you buy a home, just because that agent represented you doesn't mean that you're always going to have to pay that agent. How it works with homes that are listed generally is that when the listing agent takes their commission is split up. There's a portion of their commission that's split up with the buyer's agent. So if the portion that's being split up is equal to or greater than the amount of commission the buyer's agent is asking for, then essentially the listing agent is going to be paying the whole buyer's agent's commission. So in that case, you wouldn't be responsible for paying the buyer's agent. So that's one thing that a lot of people don't realize, and that's one thing to be aware of, is that you won't always be responsible for paying a real estate agent's commission, especially for a buyer's agent. But you should always talk to a real estate agent about their personal commission structure when you begin working with them. Don't work with them expecting to get services for free, but you can talk to them about how their commission structure works, and they'll be able to tell you on an individual basis what you'll be responsible for. So just to recap, and the things that you want to keep in mind is that there is buyer's agency, seller's agency, dual agency. Keep in mind that you're also going to be seeing the understanding whom real estate agents represent form and the consent for dual agency if you're in Maryland. And another thing you want to remember is that the source of compensation doesn't determine the agency relationship. So I hope this video was helpful, and feel free to get in touch with me if you have any questions or comments. I'd love to hear them, and I'd love to help. Thank you so much.